We welcome now the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Mississippi, Delbert Hosemann. Governor, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Gerard. How are you doing?
Doing fantastic. So we were just having a discussion, I think you caught some of it from the green room, about debt. And people are just wired different, from an individual perspective. Right. Some people can deal with it and handle it and thrive on it and put it to use and leverage it, honestly, to produce more income and wealth for themselves, and other folks are a little hesitant to do that, and that's fine. That's a good thing. We all can make those choices. From a state of Mississippi perspective, we're blessed in that we're in pretty good shape with respect to that.
We are. During my last 4 years here, we paid off $1.2 billion in debt, and I am very, I feel very strongly that that's going to pay dividends for us further. We had good years, and instead of just coming up with another way to spend it, we paid down the state's debt. About 24% of it was paid off, and I think that when we hit lean times, and you know this as well as anybody, and you got an educated audience here, they know that it doesn't always stay like this.
Right.
You don't always have 3 or 4% interest. Obviously, it's gone up now. You don't always have the economics that we had, the home sales going on, and the economic expansion that went on in this country, because they printed all that money.
Yeah.
And so we got our share, and I think we were very, very prudent with it, including paying off debt. We matched $490 million for cities. We put $1 billion in roads and bridges. There's 3 new projects: I-55 North and DeSoto, Highway 7 in Oxford, and coming from the Coffeyville area and Calhoun City, and also Tippah County 15. We put a lot in roads and bridges and maintenance in the state, and then we paid our teachers finally an additional $100 million and put $200 million more in education last year. So I think we put our money paying off debt, educating our children, and building our infrastructure. And I think that most people would say that's a good thing to do.
So, yeah, over the last 3 years, there have been some appropriation of funds to the Department of Transportation, really what we would call in the accounting world a balance sheet transaction, essentially. Came out of one fund, went to another, as opposed to peeling off current year revenues, which we use to fund general fund expenses and transferring those to the Department of Transportation. That was almost $2 billion, was it not?
And by the time you added it all up, it was. Yeah. The additional funds taken from the general fund were $1.05 billion. Okay. And so the rest of it were transfers, which they do. And as you've had Brad White on before, but basically we build these, we fund them, and then the federal government reimburses us for the ones that are federally reimbursable. A lot of these things we did that I'm telling you about were not, they're built under federal standards, but there's no federal money.
Right.
This is our money deciding that we needed to have infrastructure in Mississippi. A good bit of that was on maintenance. Hundreds of millions of dollars went to maintain our roads, and people will see, they'll see new asphalt out there and new bridges. So it was, I think, we spent our money as we should have, and that was the balance of the legislature taking a look at this, and paying down debt was an integral part of it.
Yeah. So, it's good to be in that position, and also most recent reports from the Department of Revenue and the Legislative Budget Office reflect that our revenues exceeded our estimates from last year.
$18 million.
Yeah.
Out of 7.5 billion. So I would say that's probably spot on. Yeah. I think we did a good job estimating. It's like 0.24% or something.
Yeah.
It was just really, really close. I have to give our guys and ladies credit for working hard. In our Legislative Budget Committee, which is composed of the House and Senate, we pretty much hit it dead on.
And we don't, as a practice over the last few years, we don't appropriate in the general fund all that we expect to receive in terms of income. So
that is correct.
We actually budget for a surplus.
And, we have almost $800 million in our rainy day fund now, Gerard, and $400 million plus in our hurricane fund. So our rainy day fund is full, and we have not drawn on it during my 5 years at all. And we built up the hurricane fund as well. So I've got that money sitting aside, and this American Rescue Plan money, I know you've talked about that. We got a slug of it, and we have obligated that money, but it hasn't been spent.
Right.
They have this on a reimbursement model. So they haven't spent it all. So we have been, with Treasurer McRae, we have been judicious in getting interest on our money. And this year, money was being held for these other things. We got $180 million worth of interest we wouldn't have gotten before. Now that money will go away this next year as these projects are all completed and draw down on the funds that we have been holding. But we got a bump just by investing well.
Okay. So along those lines, you know that the subject of some sort of reform of our tax structure has been debated in the halls of the Capitol there quite a bit the last 3 years. We passed a bill that did eliminate the 4% bracket. We had previously eliminated the 3%, and now we're scaling back to 5 down to 4. We got rid of the dumbest tax ever, the inventory and franchise tax.
We're actually decreasing on businesses, income, every other way. But I think this next year, last year we started on, or I did, I think the grocery tax is out of whack. To me, I think the inflation in the grocery, in the prepared foods and whatnot, non-prepared foods, has just skyrocketed. I go to the grocery store, I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
And you look at the cost of what it's cost for people to live on. I think we're currently reducing the income tax again this year and next year. We're getting rid of the inventory tax for businesses, and I think it's time to look at the grocery tax.
So that's kind of where you're leaning?
Yeah, I think that's the next spot. All the rest of them are going down automatically now.
And in this model, would you anticipate the state would have to reimburse the municipalities for the loss of that revenue?
That's a good point, because they get some of these. Their biggest revenue stream is from this. So,
yeah.
But that is, and you would be good at this from your prior history. That's a calculation. So we'll calculate whatever they would have gotten, and they'll get that anyway. And my initial thought, it's about $62 million per percentage to reduce the grocery tax.
Okay.
So that's what we're looking at for every percentage that we would do that. But that's including holding the cities and the counties whole for what the reduction would be.
So the governor, speaker, others have called for more reform to income taxes, either reducing those or full elimination. Is it fair to say that your preference would be to address the sales tax on groceries before we do that?
I think that's right, Gerard. We're in the process of cutting the income tax. We'll be like the 5th lowest state income tax in the country. I'm not seeing a lot of complaints from people about that particular one, either ones that are here or people that are moved here, like the Amazon transaction that's coming. I'm not seeing a lot of push right there on accelerating that at this point. So next year, this will phase out at 26 and 27. Will be done down to the 4%, and I think that would be the time to continue a gradual reduction. You know, it's $2 billion. It's 28% of our budget, so you can't just say, well, we're going to eliminate it tomorrow, unless you're going to do like they tried the last time, which was raise the sales tax 2.5%. So I think the way we've done it, which is a gradual reduction and not raising anybody's taxes, has been proven to be pretty smart way to do business.
Okay.
So that's what we'll be looking at. Grocery tax this year, and then the next year, as we look at our whole card for 27, we can start back on the income tax.
Let's talk about what I call the elephant in the room that might play into our financial situation and certainly our budgeting, and that's the public employees retirement system. I know you're well aware of the issues we have there. I caught your interview a couple of months ago with Mr. Gallo talking about that.
Yeah.
So we took some action this year by kind of moderating the planned increase in the employer contribution rate. That was music to the ears of many at the municipal and county level. They were concerned about how they were going to absorb a 5% all at once increase. So
absolutely, and 60,000 educators.
Yeah. So we got that. Right, that's right, with the school districts and so forth. So we've changed that around, kind of pared that down. We sent them, just infused some cash, but we still got a problem, right?
We do, and the exact amount of that is up for question. I think the House and the Senate both had real concerns about the numbers.
Yeah.
Historically, they have been off in their numbers. Their actuarial error, which you would understand, which means how much you're supposed to put in, has averaged about $134 million off over the last 15 years. So we've got some concerns about the numbers, and in the bill we require 2 actuaries. They've been hired according to my conversations with PERS Board Chief Executive Officer. Those have been hired. We'll get the numbers cleared away. We obviously have some investments, which you would be very astute at. We're very concerned about the fact that we're not hitting 7% rate of return over there, and that makes a huge difference when you project it out 25 years. So I think that's something we need to look at, and we're paying $100 million a year for investment advice.
Which isn't unreasonable based on the size of the portfolio.
Depends on how good you do.
It's competitive. well, you could do it that way as well. You may not have any takers. If you can hang around, we'll keep talking. We got Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann in the Element Well studio. We're visiting with Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. So we had a long session. That's the way we do it. The first session of a new term.
120 days.
Man, and everybody I talked to in the Capitol towards that last month was just saying, we got to get this thing over with. They were getting weary. But you guys took on a lot of high-profile issues.
We did.
Honestly, several made it across the finish line. Some of the more controversial ones did not. And I think they're left for further deliberation. The school funding, we just talked to Representative Rob Robertson early in the program, was perhaps the marquee legislation that came out of the session. You made different.
I thought certainly, we have been pushing for education, and we're seeing some results there, and I think Rob did a good job on his side. Dennis DeBar on our side did a good job. We both had different formulas and eventually worked out a formula that we thought was acceptable to everyone. And in that formula, it increased the funding by about $217 or $20 million in that range. I thought that was very helpful. We're seeing, Gerard, on the positive side, we are seeing results from investment, just like what you're talking about. You invest in something. Now we're 30th. We used to be 49th or whatever. Now we're 30th in the country, and we have made significant progress. We have some challenges. We're not reading as well as we need to do. We have a significant decrease from the 3rd grade to the 8th grade. So, and then we have absenteeism. You may have seen my recent statement about absenteeism. And we have met with the Department of Education. We met with others, and we are going to address things like cell phone usage.
I saw that from Marshall County.
Marshall County did their cell phones this year. I'd like for all of our schools to take a look at that, not only from an interruption in your education system, but also from the fact that people get harassed on that. The mental health is all the things that are coming out in every publication and every book about the mental health of our young people from being addicted or attacked on their iPhones or whatever, Samsungs. That is materializing in a significant problem. So I want our kids to have a safe place in school to learn and not be harassed or whatever during school session. And I think you'll see us do things that will allow school boards to make those decisions. Those decisions are best made at the local level, but we want to give them an implementation strategy this year. And then on absenteeism, I was really concerned about that. After COVID, Gerard, we went to like 28% chronic absentee, which means you miss more than 10% of a school year. So this last year we went down to about 24%. But we are going to address our support officers there. They're supposed to have a college degree, and they only get paid $24,000 gross. Now, quite frankly, that's take home of $1,100 or $1,200, and it's very hard to hire anybody to do this kind of work for that kind of money. So I think we'll be addressing that in the procedures for contacting parents and make sure that our kids, it's not cool not to be in school, and we need to have seats in the seat. And I'm fully intend to make sure that our superintendents and our principals are armed to be able to do that. So we need to get our kids back in school, and when they're there, we need to be concentrating on reading better and math better. We've got an upside. We're on a positive trajectory, and I know people say, oh, gosh, you're only doing this much. But we have come a long way, and I think we are implementing in the legislature is spending money on making sure we have a financial future for our children, and that's what we should be doing. That includes paying off debt and these other things, but this year we're going to push again for last dollar tuition-free community college. A lot of our kids can go on and get a certificate or whatever and go back to work. About 90% of those kids stay in Mississippi and work in Mississippi. They go to community college, so we need to make sure that they do that, and that you can actually go from kindergarten all the way to getting your certificate at a 2-year community college without paying any tuition, and that'll provide a rate of return in the future long after we're not around. But I think that's the investment we need to be making.
The issue of school choice, of course, has been debated in the legislature quite a bit. We've got some education scholarship accounts already for special needs and dyslexia. We've got the charter schools. But we've stopped short of what they've done, for example, in Florida and Arkansas, Alabama, Louisiana. Governor Abbott in Texas says he's thinking about calling a special session to get something done over there. You have traditionally not been a big fan of expanding on our ESA program now. I think that's fair to say. A bill, of course, was introduced in the House. It didn't get very far. They would have phased in universal school choice. How do you feel about that these days?
I think that we've improved our education system I just talked about. That's very important. The second thing I think about this is our kids should be able to move from one public school to another. And so I'll be supportive of that. And I don't know you call it a voucher system or call whatever it is, but if our children want to move from one district to the other, they ought to be able to do that. And you'll see me supporting that. The difference is we want to make sure that the school district that has that child doesn't hold that child from making that decision. And then the other part of this, Gerard, is we have to make sure that the other school has a capacity to receive them.
Sure.
For example, if you had 24 children in a class and you got 6 more, are you going to have 2 teachers? Where are you going to go with that? Now, if you have room, obviously that's good. So I think we have a responsibility to the school districts that are doing exceptionally well that somebody wants to go to, that they can accommodate these kids when they go over there. So we'll be talking about that this year, and I think that voucher or whatever.
With the state portion of their funding would follow them to the receiving school, but the local portion would not.
That's right.
Who would pick up the local portion?
See, that's one of the problems with the whole issue. The state portion is about $6,700
under the new program.
Yeah, that's right, and so it's a significant amount, but it's not nearly what happens from the local.
Yeah,
and also these booster clubs, Gerard, they're in there building out the weight room for the football team and doing things for the cheerleaders. There's a lot of other dollars that flow into these schools that come from parents participating in them, which is great. I mean, they pick up a lot of things. And I popped a lot of popcorn at the basketball game, so I'm familiar with that. I was president of mine. So I think there is, they want to make sure that when these children do come, that there's a capacity to receive them, and we're very receptive in the state of Mississippi. And I think that there's a way to get there.
The ballot initiative is something you've certainly expressed some opinions on. You feel like that the signature threshold needs to be higher than what the House had proposed, and here we are 3 years later, still don't have a ballot measure process in the state.
Yeah, I got it out of committee this year, and I got it on the floor, and we lost. The vote wasn't near enough. We lost it on the floor. It was argued. We tried to have a 60% approval rate to modify some of the concerns for legitimate. By
Senator Parker, I think, handled that, right?
He did. Senator Parker handled on the floor, did a great job, and so when it was obvious we didn't have the votes at 60%, we raised it to 2/3. It'd take a 2/3 vote, by the public to, in a ballot initiative to have the initiative pass, and that failed too.
Yeah.
So there is a good bit of reluctance, and it's not just the Senate, it's the House too, a good bit of reluctance towards the ballot initiative process. I think there's room there for us to have one. We don't need to have a California system, with a ballot initiative 85 or whatever. But I do think people need to have a voice in where there's something that's particularly egregious to them. So I think we'll see us look at that again. But like I said, I got it to the floor and it didn't make it.
2 measures came out of the House this year that failed in committee in the Senate. One was partial repeal of the certificate of need laws. The other was mobile sports betting. Both of those are chaired by Democrats. Do you think that played a part in that? Senator Bryan, I think, pretty much put the kibosh on the partial repeal of certificate of need. Do you support the certificate of need laws, or would you like to see some repeal there?
I think it's time for change. You'll see us as part of our committees. We have 3 or 4 different committees that we're running right now. You'll see us looking at certificates of need. I think it's time for us to take a healthy look at those. I think the House has said the same thing, and I expect there will be certificate of need reform this year.
Okay.
I believe that it's time. You pretty much have to freeze the bed part of it. The hospitals, they're struggling enough, so you're not talking about them. But all the other ancillary items that you're that come into play in CONs, I think, are on the table.
Okay.
And I'm looking forward. Our senators are looking at it. I think the House is looking at it. I think they have a committee, and we do too. So I think that's a positive thing that we'll end up ferreting through this year.
Okay. Have you got to go, or can you hang for another second?
I can hang for a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I got enough time.
Okay. We got Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann in the Element Well studio. We're coming right back. Studio, we're visiting with Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. What are some of the key legislative measures that just went into effect here?
I think we had 250 bills. I'll give you a couple of them and stop me if anything strikes you. We restricted foreign land ownership here in Mississippi on individuals. We had some losses of life for first responders, and we only had $100,000 life insurance, Gerard. And as you know, with inflation and everything else, that wasn't going to raise a family or even help much. So we put in a death benefit of $15,000 paid immediately and a $250,000 death benefit above that.
Yeah, remember that.
$50,000 plus the $25,000 for children. You know, my truck was stolen out of my driveway, and so I had a personal interest in increasing the penalties for automobile theft, and we increased them this year, doubled them, the amount of dollars and the time that we hope people that get convicted will go to prison. That's the middle side of crime. You know, they steal a lawnmower or something like that, and then they steal a vehicle, and then even worse, they steal it when you're in it. As you've seen here recently with some children that were child was dropped off after they stole a car. So we've increased the penalties on motor theft, and I'm not through with that yet. I'd like to have mandatory sentencing on it, quite frankly. We did the SAFER Act, which same family use issue on bathrooms and whatnot. That was very, very important for us, I thought. We passed that Walker-Montgomery Act, which goes back to what we're talking about in schools, Gerard, and the use of the iPhone. The young man committed suicide, at a very young age. We passed a law that these digital companies have to pay attention to what they're doing. They have to they don't give out a minor's personal information, for example. They don't target advertising these people, these young people that are in a very formative stage of their life. So we passed the Walker-Montgomery Protecting Child Online Act.
That's being challenged, I think, is it not?
It will be, and along with all the other states that are all coming to the same thing we came to. These people are making a huge amount of money, and they're being predatory on our children, and they need to at least show some examples of some caution for our kids. Same thing with Walker's Law on sex extortion. We did more career coaches. Gerard, that's one that's kind of slipped through that people don't pay as much attention to, but we now increased our career coaches up to 195 different ones. And these many of them former teachers, take these young men and women in their junior and senior year and say, where do you want to go? What do you want to be? Well, I want to be an HVAC, or I want to be a welder, or I want to be a nurse, or I want to be a doctor, or whatever they're going to be. Then they do a career path for them. And then they work with them to get their grades and whatnot and take the courses they need to and then go forward. They give them careers. And in Mississippi, we have a number of single parents, and they're working. And so this career coach is able to work with these children during the day. And I was up at Three Rivers and listened to 5 of these career coaches speak about how they had affected these children's lives and how they were calling them back, and they had gotten their certificate to do this or that. And it was just moving to me. We started with less than half that amount, and I'm real proud of our career coaches, and they've assimilated into the education system. We pay for it at the legislature, and it's been awesome. We did a bill that retired teachers can come back to work. We're short retired teachers, so we have to pay part of their PERS program in order to get them back. But we have that, and I think retired teachers were short teachers. We did, we worked on a number of different issues. There's a couple in here that are, this is a diverse discussion, so if anything strikes you fancy. We did the state-based insurance exchange, which I thought is a real positive thing. Commissioner Cheney has got that over in his office, and he's asked the governor to request the ability to do a state-based exchange. I think that can save us a good bit of money. That came late in the session from the House and the Senate. I'm very encouraged about that. We did a hurricane mitigation program where you can fix your windows and stuff hurricane-proof and get up to $10,000 from the state to get your house in order. And if you look at the pictures of Houston here from Burrell this last minute, you can see why that would be important. And it cuts your insurance cost a lot if you have your house hurricane not proof, nothing hurricane proof, but have it where your windows and doors and whatever are all done and your roof is attached better. We did a prior authorization bill. That's a big deal. If you ever get sick, we now have it. If you're in intense pain, they got 48 hours to approve you. And for non-urgent services, we reduced it to 7 days. Some people have waited months to get a prior authorization. They sit there hurting. And so a lot of time, the injury is exasperated by the fact that they didn't get a prior authorization.
I hear the providers complain about it all the time.
Yeah. Every single one of them. So we passed now the 7-day rule, and I think a week is very, that was argued by the other side, as you well imagine. But that's what we passed when we got through with it, and I'm real pleased with that. Our druggists were getting beat up by this 340B question about being able to buy their drugs at the same price cost that the hospitals do, and we had a bill and we changed that. We did MDOT where MDOT can go forward and use a bidding procedure to design bill and progressive bill. I work with them about that. That's very important. Arkansas is doing some of this too, where we can hold the cost down. It's one thing to put up $1 billion. It's another thing on how far it goes. And so we've been very concerned that our dollars weren't going far enough when it literally hit the road. So we wanted to give MDOT the ability to design bill with the contractor going forward instead of doing just a full bid process in the hopes that we would save a percentage of the cost of these highways around Mississippi. Mm-hmm. So that was, I think, something that MDOT requested, and I thought we accommodated. We funded the Main Street program again, which has been revitalizing a lot of small towns. Some of it's lighting, some of it's just painting a building, some of it's design, all kinds of different things that are going on in little bitty towns around Mississippi, and we're hoping to keep people there and living there, and the people that are living there now have a better opportunity. Devoted money to our parks. Since y'all hired me, I've put almost $70 million in fixing our parks up. And like Roosevelt's got new cabins. You'll see us finishing all of our parks, Natchez and others, where you can go to a new cabin with a fire pit and a big screen TV and a lake and a bunch of woods, for $110.
It was pretty dilapidated.
It was horrific.
Yeah.
I couldn't get anybody to tell me what it was, so I had architects go to each one of the parks and then come back with a number on what it would cost to bring them up to speed. Our electricals in there wouldn't even work. Our pads wouldn't work for people that brought their big motorhomes or anything in there. So all of that's being redone on a very good schedule. I'm very hopeful that over the next year and 2 years we'll have a completely redone park system. I think that's important. We funded our stewardship program again this year that helps outdoor stewardship, and that's doing really good. I'm keeping private lands, public lands where people can use them. So we had a lot of things going on, Gerard, and you hear about school funding or whatever, or some tax issue, but there's a lot of other matters that are going on in the legislature, and I think we had a good year.
Yeah. So the mobile sports betting, I want to come back to that. That didn't make it either.
It did not.
Yeah. What do you think about that? Where do you stand on that?
I have mixed emotions about that. I'll just be direct with you. The ability for people to gamble without any reservation, young people. This example of this LSU wide receiver, Butte, he waged $500,000 while he was playing at LSU. Now, Gerard, I've just got some issues with that, about having access to that kind of gaming. The gaming industry itself was split on this. I think more of the big ones wanted to have mobile sports betting and have that in other states, and the smaller ones were concerned that they would be locked out of the system. So I thought our guy, our Senator Blunt, did a really good job of analyzing all of that, having all the hearings in the parties, and at the end we weren't able to reach an agreement. We, the Senate, wasn't able to reach an agreement on adopting mobile sports betting. But there are issues with that, economic issues, and keeping up with it, and who's doing what. In that regard, we did change the image and likeness bill, and for college education, we work with Jackson State, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Southern, all of them. So we have a new image and likeness bill, and that, of course, is exploding in the country. So, and part of that is involved in part of what we just talked about. So I think it'll be reviewed again by the Senate, and they'll have everybody in. And when the gaming industry has been so helpful to Mississippi economically and otherwise, I don't want to pick winners and losers. I'd like for them to decide something that they think is doable.
For what it's worth, North Carolina enacted it a few months ago. Unbelievable amount of revenue it's generating for them, for what that's worth.
I think our projections range from 12 to 20 million.
25. Appreciate you coming in, Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
You bet. We're coming right back, folks. Final